My name is Jason, and I'm 45 years old. I thought I had the perfect life. I was married to Maggie, the kindest and sweetest woman I had ever met. She's 38 now, and together, we built a life that many would envy. When we first met, I thought I had won the lottery with her. Our marriage felt like a lucky ticket, one of those rare relationships where everything just clicked. But as I was soon to find out, sometimes life has a way of pulling the rug out from under you when you least expect it. We have a blended family. Maggie had twins, a boy and a girl, from her previous marriage. They're 12 years old now, and I've always treated them as if they were my own. My son, Ralph, from my previous marriage, just turned 18 and recently started college. My first wife passed away when Ralph was young, so Maggie and I stepped into this new family dynamic, working together to make sure all three kids felt loved and secure. On that ill-fated day, Maggie had taken the twins to visit my parents. It was a Saturday, and Ralph was away at college, so I was left alone at home for the first time in ages. I decided to spend the day going through some old things, searching for a specific item that had been on my mind. We have a room where we keep all our old belongings, a sort of storage area filled with various boxes, all stuffed with memories and things we didn't have the heart to throw away. One by one, I opened each box, carefully sifting through our past. I was lost in nostalgia when I came across a small, unassuming box tucked away in the corner. Something told me to open it, even though I didn't expect to find anything out of the ordinary. But as soon as I lifted the lid, I froze. Inside the box were a collection of letters, neatly tied together with a ribbon. They were addressed to my wife, Maggie, and the sender's name caught my eye, Terry. Terry. That name sounded vaguely familiar. Then it hit me. Terry was Maggie's ex-husband. She had told me a bit about him when we first started dating. From what I knew, he wasn't a good man. Maggie mentioned that he drank heavily, was involved in some shady activities, and even had a violent streak. Eventually, Terry disappeared from her life, leaving her to raise the twins on her own. Maggie rarely spoke about him, and honestly, I never pushed for details. I was just happy she had found a way out of such a toxic relationship. I stood there for a moment, staring at the letters. My heart began to pound in my chest, and a part of me hesitated to read them. But curiosity got the better of me, and with trembling hands, I untied the ribbon. As I skimmed through the first letter, I noticed something alarming. This wasn't an old letter. It was recent, dated only 9 months ago. A cold feeling crept over me, and my mind started racing. Why was Maggie still in contact with Terry? And what could possibly be so important that they were exchanging letters after all this time? I had so many questions, but no answers. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but a knot of unease settled in my stomach. I stood there, clutching the letters, feeling a chill run down my spine. It was the first inkling that maybe, just maybe, I didn't know my wife as well as I thought I did. I stood there, holding the letters, trying to make sense of what I had just read. The words on those pages blurred as my mind raced, struggling to reconcile this new reality with the life I thought I knew. Maggie, my sweet, loving wife, had been hiding something huge from me. Not just recently, but for years. I kept asking myself, why didn't she tell me? I trusted her completely, and I thought we had built something real, something honest. But these letters, they told a different story. I remember when Maggie and I first met, how broken we both were. She had been through her own kind of hell, and I was still mourning the loss of my wife. Meeting Maggie was like finding a light in the darkness. She was exhausted back then. You could see it in her eyes. But there was still this warmth, this kindness that drew me in. It wasn't long before I realized that Maggie wasn't just someone who could help me move on. She was my chance at a new beginning. The kids got along so well too. It was like the universe had given all of us a second chance at happiness. But now, standing in that dusty room with these letters clutched in my hands, it felt like all of that had been a lie. I took a deep breath and sat down on an old chair, my mind spinning. Was this whole marriage built on secrets? Had Maggie been lying to me from the start? I looked at the letters again and read them more carefully this time. Terry had written them from prison. He talked about how much he regretted what he had done, how he had changed,
and how sorry he was for everything. But what really shook me was when he wrote about Maggie visiting him. He even mentioned that she brought the twins with her. I could feel the blood drain from my face as I read that. Maggie had been taking the kids to see him, their father, and I had no idea. She had always told me that she was visiting her uncle, helping him around the house, and that part was true. Her uncle was the one who took her in when she left Terry, the one who helped her rebuild her life. But now I could see that some of those visits weren't just about helping an old man. She had been seeing Terry, bringing him their children, and keeping all of it hidden from me. My hands started to shake, and I felt a rush of anger, sadness, and betrayal all at once. I knew I had to dig deeper. I needed to find out how far this went. I put the letters back in the box and made my way to the living room, where Maggie's laptop was. She always kept it on the desk in the corner, and as far as I knew, she didn't use a password. Sure enough, when I opened the laptop, I had access to everything. I started with her email, my heart pounding as I clicked through the inbox. It took a few minutes, but eventually, I found emails from Terry. She had marked them as work-related, hidden among messages from her job and other routine things. It was clear she was trying to cover her tracks. I opened one of the emails, and my heart sank. They weren't just about the kids. Terry was pouring his heart out to her, talking about how much he still loved her, how much he regretted everything. And worse, Maggie had replied. She wasn't encouraging him, but she wasn't pushing him away either. It was like she was keeping a door open, just in case.
I closed the email and took a deep breath. I had to see if there was more. Maggie and I had always been open about our finances, but I never really paid close attention to her spending. She had her own bank account, which made sense since we both brought money into the marriage. I opened her online banking, hoping I'd find something that would explain everything. As I scrolled through the transactions, a pattern started to emerge. Regular withdrawals from ATMs near the prison, payments to hotels and restaurants in the town where her uncle lived, and even a few transfers to an account I didn't recognize. It felt like my heart was being ripped out of my chest. Maggie wasn't just visiting her uncle, she was spending money on Terry, maybe even supporting him while he was in prison. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to keep my emotions in check. All those weekends when I thought she was being the caring niece, the trips where I stayed behind to take care of the kids, she had been living a lie, leading a double life right under my nose. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was slipping away from me, one secret at a time. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, to demand answers. But another part of me was scared of what else I might find, scared of the truth I might uncover. So I sat there, staring at the screen, wondering how much more of this I could take. Before you find out what happened next, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I checked her email one more time. I went through all the emails I could find. Unfortunately, I found a few more correspondences with Terry. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Terry was out of prison. He was out, and Maggie had seen him. They had spent an unforgettable evening together, and she wanted him to see the kids again. I couldn't read any more of her messages. I was afraid of what else I might find. My hands were shaking, my vision was blurry, and all I felt was this rage bubbling up inside me, threatening to explode. How could she do this to me? How could she lie to me, betray me, and drag those innocent kids into this mess? It wasn't just about the infidelity. It was the deceit, the lies, the fact that she had been hiding this from me for so long. And for what? For some washed-up, violent ex-husband who had left her years ago? I slammed the laptop shut, nearly cracking the screen, and stood up so quickly that the chair fell over behind me. My chest was heaving, and I could barely catch my breath. All I could think about was getting Maggie out of my life, out of my home. I stormed into our bedroom, that place where we shared so many memories, where I thought we had built something real, and started tearing her clothes out of the closet. Dresses, blouses, whatever I could get my hands on. I threw them all towards the door in a blind rage. I wanted her gone. I wanted every trace of her out of my life. I didn't care if it was rash or if it would break the twins' hearts. All I could see was red
and I had to act before I did something I'd regret even more. I grabbed her shoes, her bags, anything that belonged to her, and hurled them out into the hallway. My breathing was ragged, my heart pounding in my ears. But I didn't care. I was done with her lies, done with the betrayal. All those years we had spent together, all those moments when I thought we were happy, it felt like they had all been ripped away from me in an instant. When I finally stopped, I stood there, surrounded by the mess I had made. I was panting, and a cold sweat dripped down my back. I leaned against the doorframe, trying to catch my breath, trying to process everything that had just happened. The realization hit me like a freight train. Maggie wasn't the woman I thought she was. The life we had built, the family we had created, it was all falling apart, and I had no idea how to fix it. I glanced at the pile of her belongings strewn across the floor, and my eyes started to sting. I thought about the twins. They weren't my blood, but I had raised them as my own. I was the one who tucked them in at night, who helped them with their homework, who taught them how to ride their bikes. And now, because of Maggie's lies, I was about to rip them out of my life too. I sank to the floor, my back against the wall, and buried my face in my hands. I could feel the tears burning in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to break down. Not yet. I needed to stay strong, to keep my head on straight, even though everything around me was crumbling. What was I supposed to do? Throw Maggie out and cut ties with the twins? Or confront her and demand answers? I felt this overwhelming urge to just leave, to walk out the door, and never come back. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't solve anything. I couldn't just run away from this. I had to face it head on. Maggie came home that evening, and the moment she walked through the door, I felt a surge of anger rise up in me again. I didn't say a word at first. I just watched her. Watched the way she moved through the house like everything was normal, like our whole life hadn't just crumbled to pieces. She looked at me with that same warm smile that had once melted my heart. But now, all it did was make me sick. "Jason," she said, her voice gentle and concerned. "Is everything okay? Why is the house such a mess?" I couldn't hold back any longer. "It's over, Maggie," I spat out. "Our life, our marriage, everything. It's all ruined." She stood there, confusion washing over her face, and that's when I threw the letters at her. They scattered across the floor, and she stared down at them, her eyes widening as she realized what they were. I pointed to her laptop, my voice shaking with rage. "You think you could hide this from me forever? You thought I'd never find out." Her hands went to her mouth, and tears immediately began to spill down her cheeks. "Jason, I can explain," she stammered. "Please, let me explain." I felt a wave of disgust wash over me. "You're going to stand there and try to justify this? After everything we've been through?" She fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she cried. "I swear, I didn't. Terry, he's manipulative. He has this way of getting into your head. I know he's a bastard. I know he's no good. But I didn't know how to break free. Please, Jason, believe me. I wanted to stop seeing him. I just didn't know how."
Her words meant nothing to me. I had heard enough lies for one lifetime. "You chose him," I said coldly. "You chose him over me, over this family. And now you want to stand here and beg for forgiveness? It's too late for that, Maggie. It's far too late." She crawled toward me, reaching out to grab my hand, but I pulled away from her. "Jason, please," she sobbed. "I love you. I never stopped loving you. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could just keep him at arm's length, but he kept pulling me back in. I promise it's over. I'll cut him off. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." But I couldn't hear any more of it. I pointed to the pile of her belongings I had thrown by the door. "Get out," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Take your things and leave. And tomorrow, you're coming back for the twins. Pack up their stuff and go. I'm done." Maggie's face twisted in pain, and for a moment, I almost felt a pang of sympathy. But then I remembered those letters, the emails, the lies, and any trace of pity vanished. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me the way Terry had manipulated her. "No, Jason," she pleaded. Don't do this. Please don't make me leave. I can't lose you. I can't lose this family. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, and I know I made a mistake. I'll fix it, I swear. I felt my control snap, and before I knew it, I was shouting at her, my voice echoing through the house. You already lost me, Maggie. You threw it all away the moment you let him back into your life. You brought that monster back into our family, and you lied to me every single day. You've destroyed everything. Now get out. She stumbled back, tears streaming down her face, and for a moment, I thought she might try to fight me. But instead, she just nodded, her shoulders shaking with every sob. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. She scrambled to her feet, grabbed her purse, and bolted out the door. I watched her run to her car, her sobs echoing in the quiet night air. The engine roared to life, and she sped away, disappearing into the darkness. As the silence settled over the house, I collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. I had been holding back my tears, trying to stay strong, but now that she was gone, I couldn't stop them from falling. All the anger, the betrayal, the sadness, it hit me all at once, and I broke down. This was it. The life I thought I had, the family I had built, it was gone. And now I had to face the wreckage, piece by piece. The morning came, and with it a heavy silence. Maggie didn't return, and the twins stayed at my parents' house. I sat in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, just staring at the empty chair where she used to sit. Everything felt surreal, like I was trapped in some nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. The house, which had always felt warm and full of life, now felt like an empty shell. I couldn't just sit there doing nothing. I needed to take action, to feel like I was in control of something, anything. So I marched up to the twins' room and began packing their belongings into boxes. With every shirt I folded, every toy I tossed in, I felt a part of me breaking. These weren't just random items, they were pieces of a life I had built, memories I had shared with them. But I was too angry, too hurt to think about that. All I knew was that I needed them out of the house. It wasn't long before my son, Ralph, walked through the front door. He was supposed to be at college, but he said he needed to pick up something he'd forgotten. When he saw me standing in the twins' room, surrounded by boxes, he paused, his eyes narrowing with concern. Dad, what's going on? He asked, his voice tinged with worry. I didn't want to tell him. He didn't need to be dragged into this mess. But the words tumbled out of me before I could stop them, and I ended up spilling everything. The letters, the emails, Maggie's betrayal, and my decision to kick her out. As I spoke, I could see the pain in Ralph's eyes. He tried to stay strong, but I knew this was hurting him too. Dad, just take a step back, all right? He said gently. You're upset, and I get it. But you need to calm down. Think this through. Maybe you don't have to make any decisions right now. I can't stay in this house with all of this hanging over my head, I snapped, my voice harsher than I intended. She lied to me, Ralph. She dragged the twins into this. How can I ever trust her again? Ralph sighed and sat down on the edge of the bed. I know you're angry, he said, but you're not thinking straight. You've lost someone before, and now you're facing it all over again. But maybe this time, it doesn't have to end this way. Just give yourself some time. Take a break. I wanted to argue with him, to tell him he didn't understand, but deep down, I knew he was right. He'd already lost his mother once, and he was terrified of losing his family again. As much as I hated to admit it, part of me knew that I needed to take a step back. Ralph left the house shortly after, but not before giving me one last worried look. I heard him talking on his phone as he walked out the door, but I didn't pay much attention to it. I didn't have the energy to care. I just sat there, staring at the boxes, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. About an hour later, my phone rang. It was my father. I picked up, my voice hoarse from all the shouting and crying the night before. Jason, I just spoke to Ralph, he said, his tone gentle but firm. You need to calm down, son. I know you're hurting, but throwing everything away in the heat of the moment isn't going to make it any better. Dad, you don't understand, I said, my voice shaking. She lied to me. She brought him back into our lives. How can I just pretend like nothing happened? I'm not saying you should, my father replied. But you've got to think about the twins. They've already been through so much. They see you as their father, Jason. You can't just cut them out because of Maggie's mistakes. I felt a lump form in my throat, and for the first time in days, I felt the weight of what I was doing. It wasn't just about Maggie. It was about those kids who had come to me for comfort, for guidance, who had trusted me to be their father. And now, in my anger and hurt, I was about to rip that away from them too. I just don't know what to do, I whispered, my voice breaking. Take your time, my father said. You don't have to decide anything right now. The twins will stay with us for as long as you need, and when you're ready, you can figure out what comes next. Just promise me you won't do anything rash. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Okay, Dad. I'll try. After we hung up, I sat there in silence, staring at the half-packed boxes. My mind was spinning, my heart torn in 1,000 different directions. I had already started talking to a lawyer about divorce, but now I wasn't so sure. Maybe it was my pride, my ego, that was making me act this way. Maybe there was still a part of me that wasn't ready to let go, that still hoped there was something worth saving. Despite the turmoil inside me, I made up my mind. I called the lawyer and started the process of ending my marriage. I had thought long and hard about it, and no matter how much doubt and pain tugged at my heart, I couldn't see a way back from this. Maggie had crossed a line, one that I couldn't forgive or forget. I needed to cut her out of my life once and for all. When Maggie found out, she came to the house, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She stood in the doorway, her hands shaking as she begged me to reconsider. Jason, please, she whispered, her voice cracking. Don't do this. Don't throw everything away. I know I made a mistake, but we can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. I looked at her, and for a moment, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who had once healed my broken heart. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. It's too late, I said, my voice cold and distant. You made your choice, Maggie, and now I'm making mine. She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no compassion, just a dull ache in my chest where my heart used to be. I want you to take the twins, I said, my tone flat. Pack up their things and leave. I don't want to see them anymore. Maggie looked up at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. Jason, they're your family too, she pleaded. They love you. They think of you as their father. You can't just walk away from them. They have a father, I snapped, anger flaring up inside me. A father you took them to see behind my back. Let him be their dad. I'm done. The words felt like knives in my throat, but I refused to take them back. I needed to be free of this, free of the lies, the betrayal. Maggie had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it, with all the consequences that came with it. I watched her crumble, her shoulders shaking as she cried, but I didn't move to comfort her. I couldn't. I had nothing left to give. Please, Jason, she whispered one last time. Don't do this. Goodbye, Maggie, I said, my voice hollow. Take your kids and go. We're finished. She stood there for a moment, staring at me, hoping I'd change my mind. But I didn't. I turned my back on her and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the doorway. As I heard her sobs fade into the distance, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness wash over me. It was done. The life I had known, the family I had built, it was all over.